Hello, everyone. I'm Mohammed Tawakkoli, the inaugural director of the Elahé Omidyar Mir-Djalali Institute of Iranian Studies at the University of Toronto. I welcome you all to Rethinking History, Returning to Archives and Documents, a virtual seminar series co-convened with my colleague, Professor Arzu Azad of Oxford University, in collaboration with the Invisible East program and the Faculty of Asian and Middle Eastern Studies at Oxford. I'm grateful to Professor Arzu Azad for this initiative. In addition, I would like to thank Professor Najmabadi for accepting to inaugurate the Rethinking History series. I'm also grateful to Roshan Cultural Heritage Foundation and Dr. Elahé Mir-Djalali for their exemplary support of the Institute. At the outset, and before my colleague, Professor Azad, introduces the series, I'd like to express our collective gratitude to Canada's Indigenous people and acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto and the Elahé Omidyar Mir-Djalali Institute of Iranian Studies operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of Credit River. Today, this meeting place continues to be the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to teach and learn on their ancestral homeland. Professor Azad.
Thank you so much, Mohammed Jan, for this kind introduction. I'm really delighted that we are all here. We have 110 participants and the numbers are going up. This is fantastic. I think this shows that the topic is interesting to lots of people from lots of places. First of all, I would like to thank Mohammed Tawakkoli for organizing this together with me and for being so open to doing what we're trying to do, which I'll tell you in a second. I'd also like to thank his staff, Shabnam Jun, and also Sylvia Ferreri, who's my colleague here in Oxford. We also have Tommy Benfi on the call, who is one of our postdoctoral researchers. So I am Arzu Azad, and I'm the Senior Research Fellow, as was already mentioned, here in Oxford. And I'm also the director of a program called Invisible East, in which we look at documents from the 8th to the 13th century from the Iranian world. So the idea for this series came about when Mohammed Jan and I were at a conference, weren't we, in Maryland? I think it was in November. So not that long ago, and at the dinner on the sides of that, it was on digital humanities, and we saw lots of interesting projects in the US of digitizing documents, but they were all documents from the Western Islamic world, if you want, so Egypt, Syria, and so on. And we were talking about how it struck us that there isn't really that much, we thought, on documents from the Iranian world. So what we mean by that, Iranian world or Eastern Islamicate world is another term. No term is perfect. But what we mean by that, just to be clear, is the world that at some point in history significantly influenced by Iranian or Persianate culture. And that basically takes us from Iran and the Middle East through to Central Asia, through to Northern India, and also Western China. And we thought, why don't we do a series that is sort of diachronic and looks at documents and archives from the earliest days, so from ancient times, say starting with the Achaemenids, going right up to contemporary period. We don't know anyone anyway of anyone who's done that before, and we thought, let's give it a try. And the reason why we were trying to understand why is it that documents and archives have received the same kind of attention, those the Iranian world, as they had from the, if you want, mainly Arabic-speaking world. And we just thought it's perhaps because it's almost become a truism that documents don't necessarily feature in the historical narrative on this region. and I know I'm exaggerating, and actually there are quite a few people who are doing exactly that, and that's why we've invited them to come and talk to us. But by and large, certainly in my period, documents are studied by linguists. They're deciphered, they're translated, they're published, and linguists read them, but historians have been very hesitant. So we think that documents, I don't need to convince you, but maybe just to put it out there, do provide us with a slightly more, if you want, raw source base. Documents are not perfect. We have survival biases because many documents are found, for example, in rubbish and trash or rubbish dumps. They aren't nicely curated or cataloged often, as you find with manuscripts. So it comes with problems, but on the other hand, they're not curated. And so they don't necessarily come from a court perspective either. For example, the ones I work with come from a very local village level. So you really get this sort of perspective from documents that you cannot get from narrative sources. So I think I'll leave it at that, just to say that we've currently scheduled 4 lectures, and Professor Najmabadi we're really happy that she has accepted and will be kicking us off with the first lecture today. But then just to maybe for your diaries to bear in mind or jot down, if you haven't already, is that our next lecture will be in May, on the 18th of May, with Jennifer Jenkins talking about Iran archives in the German Foreign Office. And following after that, on the 15th of June, going back in time to the 8th century, where we will hear Jeffrey Khan from Cambridge talking about Arabic documents from early Islamic Khorasan in an area that's today Afghanistan. And then the talk after that in July will be by me. And, we decided, let's see how these first few go. And if everybody feels like this is really worth pursuing further, then we will very happily organize many more such lectures. So I will now hand over to Muhammad John so he can kindly introduce our first speaker. Just to say, in terms of how we're planning to do the format is, if you have questions, by all means, type them into the chat or write them down as you hear the lecture. Don't wait to the end. And our speaker very kindly agreed to then answer your questions. And actually today's session will be more interactive in that she's really keen on getting a conversation going today. So I think with that, I will hand over now to Muhammad John to do the introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Azad. As you all know, Professor Afsaneh Najmabadi is a leading historian of modern Iran, and many of you are familiar with her extraordinary scholarship and historiographical contribution. But to refreshen your memories, however, I will offer a concise introduction. Afsaneh Najmabadi is the Francis Lee Higginson Professor of History and of Studies of Women, Gender, and Sexuality at Harvard University. She was the founding editor of Mir-Djalali, a pioneering journal of feminist research, which was published between spring 1984 and fall 1999. Mir-Djalali inaugurated a significant shift in Iranian studies by bringing serious scholarly attention to women as agent of historical change. In addition to numerous stellar and groundbreaking articles, Professor Najmabadi has published several pioneering books in both Persian and English. These include the 1992 Ma'ayib al-Rijal, Vices of Men, as edited and annotated, and an edited and annotated publication of the 19th century manuscript by Bibi Khanum Asarabadi, with an introductory essay in English and Persian. The 1995 Hikayat Dukhtaran Quchan, an original women-centered account of the constitutional revolution of 1905-1911. Dukhtaran Quchan was published in English as The Story of Daughters of Uchon, Gender and National Memory in Iranian History by Syracuse University Press in 1998. Exploring the life of the author of Vices of Men in 1996, she co-edited Bibi Khanem Astarabadi and Khanem Afzal Waziri with Mehrangiz Mallah. This was followed by the 1999 publication of Sadiq Dolatabadi, Letters, Writings, and Remembrances, co-edited with Mahdukht Sanati in 3 volumes. In 2005, she published Zanan Sharq, Women of the East, Documents from and about the Second Women of the East Congress of 1932, which was co-edited with Ghulam Reza Salami. In addition to these groundbreaking Persian books, Professor Afsaneh Najmabadi has published several monographs in her 2005 Women with Mustaches and Men Without Beards, Gender and Sexual Anxieties of Iranian Modernity, published by the University of California Press, Berkeley, is by far the most original and groundbreaking research on modern Iran. In recognition of her exemplary contribution to women's history and feminist theory, she was the recipient of 2005 John Kelly Memorial Prize of the American Historical Association. This volume was followed by her 2014 Professing Selves, Transsexuality and Same-Sex Desire in Contemporary Iran, published by Duke University Press, exemplifying Afsaneh's extraordinary intellectual and historiographical originality and bravery. Professing Selves received the 2014 John Kelly Prize from the American Historical Association and was the co-winner of the 2015 John Boswell Prize, LBGT History of the American Historical Association. Her recently released book, Familiar Undercurrents, establishes a high bar for intellectual and scholarly originality and bravery. Familiar Undercurrent is an exemplar of returning to letters and documents and rethinking history. Today, Professor Afsaneh Najmabadi will be speaking on her archival masterpiece, Women's Worlds in Qajar, Iran. Professor Najmabadi.
Well, thank you for inviting me for this. I'll just say a few words about what went into the thinking for Women's World in Qajar, Iran, and then open it to questions and comments. The idea behind the archive comes from the fact that often people said that it's not possible to do good history of women and bring women into historical narrative because of lack of sources. As it turns out, it's not so much lack of sources, but inaccessibility of sources that one needs, in the sense that the kind of documents and pictures, objects of daily life, etc., that one needs to access. These are kept by families. They are not put in any kind of institutional archive or anything like that. And therefore, being kept by families, it makes it difficult for historians to access. So the idea was basically go to families and not to collect these things, but basically to photograph them, digitize them, and make them available for researchers and historians to use on a website. So that's what WWQI is about. We've done a whole lot of we've digitized a lot of documents and put them online for people to use, and it has been extensively used. I've received emails from researchers in Iran, students who have used it and have indicated that without the archive, they would not have been able to do the work they're doing. So it's good to see that it's actually doing what it was, what it hoped to do. I think that's all I want to say now. And if there are questions about it, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Professor Najmabadi. One of the things that is, I have gone through your archive and very familiar with it. It seems like you have spent a great amount of labor contacting families and convincing them to allow you to scan the material and making the material available to general public and scholars. Could you give us a few samples of these kind of challenges that you have had with individual families that you reached out to? And how did you decide who to reach out to and who to identify for acquiring the collection?
I guess we just started with whoever we had access to. And through individuals' connection. And then after a while, it was actually families who contacted us and wanted their material to be added. So then it was much easier to be selective and to basically add what was missing, to be more choosy about what we do. So, I mean, that's how it's been going. And the biggest challenge has been to sort of convince people that what they hold is actually worthy of historical historical preservations. People often think they don't have anything that would fit this project, but once you start talking to people and looking at what they have, it turns out there's a lot of material, documents, pictures, others that they hold, but they don't consider them worth preserving in this archive. So once you explain to them why these things are important for historical documentation, then it's really easy to proceed.
Yeah, you have an impressive number of personal letters. Did people sort of volunteer to share those with you, or did you have to convince them how important it is to make those the details of the private letters? Or I saw the collection that Shabnam was showing, talaqnames, for example. Did the family decide to share that voluntarily, or did you have to convince them?
Combination of both. Some people voluntarily made these available, and in other cases, we had to encourage people and convince them that it's important to access these documents.
What kind of advice do you have for historians who will be interested in personal familial archives? How do you go about to collect them? How do you reach out? Can you give us a few examples and hints for people who are interested in sort of walking on the path that you have created?
I'm not sure what you're getting at. Can you explain a bit?
Yes, let's say people identify some gaps in your collection, and they want to reach out to various families or create, for example, the Pahlavi period equivalent of your archive.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just interested in the personal sort of reach out that you had, and how did you go about it, and provide some guidelines, do's and don'ts for other scholars who may be interested in this similar project for a later period or earlier period.
Well, it's hard to answer that question. It's a because what we were doing, we were basically inventing as we went along. Of what to do, because we didn't have any precedent to go on. So it's a it was sort of what? How should I say?
And I'm interested in that invention, that you have invented it, and you have put a lot of intellectual and also time into sort of figuring out how to acquire such a great collection that has been private and people are hesitant to share it. Could you, that sort of the basics of what you did, what you invented, that others could use as a guideline and do's and don'ts? Don't just call someone and tell them, give me this and that, go about this way or that way. So some sort of guidelines that you could provide.
I guess what I would say is that you need to be very patient with explaining to people why what they have is actually important to make available to the public. It's been generally not difficult to get people to share their stuff.
Very good. Thank you.
One Elham Qeitanchi asks, what was the most surprising result of this archive? Is it all authentically Persian or a mix of other ethnicities and cultures?
And languages.
Languages, maybe. Is it all in Persian, or do you also have other languages in these documents?
Did you have Judeo-Persian or Armenian letters, or, you know?
No, I think it's all Persian.
Uh-huh.
We didn't have access to others.
And what was the most surprising element of this archive for you?
Once people realized that this is just widely available, and it's not a sort of political project that they have to worry about the consequences, then there was a willingness to share it. One of the things that helped was that without any, that the archive was accessible in Iran for a long time, then it got filtered. So that made life a little bit more difficult, people worrying about why it's filtered. But other than that, there wasn't any problem.
Afsaneh, how much of your success has to do with Afsaneh Najmabadi's charm and ability to sort of convince people that this is a really worthwhile project, share your material, and if someone else goes, they may not get the same result that you did?
I don't know. I don't think I'm very charming.
You are, of course.
I don't know. I think perhaps more than me, the fact that this was a project based at Harvard University. That I think was more important.
And also the people who shared it probably have been familiar with your impressive scholarship, and they knew that you're going to do something very serious with them, right?
Perhaps.
Yeah.
No, I've used a lot of the archive for my latest book, and sometimes when I was working on that book, I felt like I've created this whole archive in order to write my book, but I think other people have used it too.
Yeah.
Great. So
if I may, I just want to add one thing.
Yes, please.
The kind of plethora of documents on this website are so diverse in structure and in the way that the topics are related, that it's really difficult to actually pick one that is a representative of how things are structured. And one that too, these documents mostly are legal documents, which require real kind of digging into figuring out who wrote what and what stamp is for whom, which might be a little bit difficult to do on short note, like as a short-term notice. So my apologies to everyone if I can't find a representative, but the more I kind of go back to my recollection, I think it's harder to do. If there's anything, Dr. Najmabadi, that you think might be a good representative that you would like me to show, I'm happy to do that.
No, I can't think of anything particular.
The collection includes an impressive number of photos, family photos. Shabnam Jan, can you show some of those family photos?
Can I just say something on the documents and the legal documents? Yes. I find that quite interesting, because the documents that we are working on in Invisible East are the earliest Persian writing in the world, in the original, and they are legal documents. So even though if one, as a Persianist or Iranist, one doesn't think of the earliest Persian writing to be legal, but it is legal. So, and we are digitizing these as well, and it'd be very interesting. I mean, this kind of shows how you can start comparing, can't you, and looking at these the 11th century documents we have, and then compare them with the Qajar documents and see how much is still remains. And certainly in format, my guess is that a lot of it still remains. So anyway, that's just a little side note. And I see you've organized them under the rubric of legal, I think. I saw one earlier, so that's really helpful. But yeah, sorry, if you want to show the photos, please go ahead.
Dr. Najmabadi, some of the documents that you have displayed are property documents, ownership of houses and other things. Based on the research that I have done myself, I came to conclude that a lot of the first wave of land registry property registration was done by women, and I was impressed to see so many houses belong to women rather than to their husbands. Have you seen such a trend at all in early registration of documents, or in documents or property ownership documents of the Qajar period, and how widely was women's ownership of properties?
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of properties, especially houses and like that, were owned by women. And once the registration of ownership began to be officially carried out, they were registered under the woman's ownership.
Right. And did that give special power to women who could kick out their husband when they decided to divorce or separate?
I'm not sure, because women couldn't divorce. The husband had to divorce them.
Yeah.
So how much they could use the property ownership as a lever to get that. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how that kind of information can be accessed.
Yeah, and whether they did actually, if they wanted to get a divorce, kick him out and use the property documentation to sort of back up their claim.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Well, shall I that we have quite a few more comments and questions.
Please.
So the next one, Saida Hariri says, considering the social status of women in the past 44 years, would you think it is easier now to put together such a collection about women in the 20th or 21st century Iran? That's one question. And I'll read the second one after.
Probably. I think the more recent period, they're more accessible, and more people are probably willing to make it accessible.
Another question I'll come back to Ilham's question, but I've already read one of hers. So Suzanne Byrne, she's asking, actually, we've met years ago, Susanna, nice to see this. To whom should one turn if one thinks that one has suitable material? Who can she contact if she wants to submit material?
For the WWQI project?
Yeah, for your database.
Yeah, we've actually stopped adding new collections. We didn't get our last NEH grant, and we decided it's time to wrap it up. So we're actually not adding any new collections.
Okay.
Is there anywhere else that such material could be perhaps sent that you could recommend?
I can't think of any other similar project. Can you, Mohammad?
Well, we are beginning to create an archive for physical material at the University of Toronto. And the archive, my own physical collection will be there. So that's a possibility. But actively collecting and archiving, digitizing, we don't have something similar to the great work of Afsaneh.
So one question is, one of the most remarkable features of this archive is that you were able to get documents from people from different classes, because usually documents from the elite are more available. Can you tell us about how you were able to achieve this? From Nahid Mozaffari.
The historian of Qajar Iran.
Yeah, certain type of documentation, like registries of Mahzar, the places like that, they include material from all classes, because they all went to register their material. So if you have that kind of material, that kind of documentation available, that will give you access to non-elite material as well.
How come all the documents are in Farsi? It is anyway about Qajar period, and it's supposed to have partly Turkish or some Arabic, doesn't it? Azerbaijani Turkish, he says, or some Arabic.
I mean, the stuff we accessed, they were all in Persian. I'm trying to think. There was a small number of documents that were in Judeo-Persian. But aside from that, I can't think of other material.
Okay, so there's some material in Judeo-Persian, which is Persian.
But very, very few, yeah.
Okay. Where do you draw the line at what a quote document is, and what do you consider to be a valuable document worth archiving? From Nargis.
Draw the line what?
It says, so the question is, where do you draw the line? What do you call a document? What's a document and what's not a document? And what's a document that's worth archiving? How do you make those decisions? Or do you just archive everything you get your hands on, I guess is the question.
I mean, initially we archived anything that we got our hands on, but then as the project grew, we became more selective and chose what was underrepresented in the archive.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how we decided.
And the question is, what do you call a document versus a different kind of text? So to me, for example, as a medieval historian, it's very clear what a document is. It's something that's written, it's like a day-to-day piece of writing that's written to be used rather than sort of for your daily life, rather than some manuscript of a divan or something like that you might have on your shelf, so to speak, and pick up once a month or whatever. You don't need it to live. While documents, you need it. They govern your legal and administrative life. So that's how we define it. But I guess, how do you define it?
I mean, what constitutes a document is like whatever kind of material, whether photographs, writings, or whatever, that that is of value in terms of information it provides for a historian.
Yeah. Could it also have a lot to do with the kind of historical questions that you ask? For example, Shabnam showed a couple of the vaccination documentation. These vaccination documentations, while may not have much personal information, but they could provide, essential information for an impressive kind of work on vaccination. And in a sense, it really depends. For example, there are documents on wages of amount of money paid to this person and that person, and it seems like many of them are servants. And the kind of historical questions that you have enables you to use a document that would seem worthless or not very important. So I would say that our historical questions defines what is a document, what is a significant document, and what is not.
No, definitely, it has to do with what questions you ask and how you pursue it.
Right.
Sorry. So some more questions. Because you mostly work with the family who own the collection, were there any copyright issues for displaying these objects online?
No, before we did anything, we asked the families to basically sign a document and give permission for all of these to go online to be used. If they didn't want to sign that document, we wouldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then it says, I'm trying to keep them. Okay, another one on documents from Jane Lewison. She says, we are collecting documents mostly on the Pahlavi period and making them available on the Gulistan project platform, which is www.gulistan.org. One of the main reasons for Arabic documents being digitized has to do with generous funding of the Gulf states to the digitization of Arabic language materials. That's probably true for literary texts. I haven't seen it so much for documents, to be honest. But from my experience, the main funding goes to the Cairo Geniza, which is we have a Princeton Geniza project. There are about 14 or 15 institutions that are working on this material, and that money is not coming from the Gulf. It's coming from Jewish communities, as far as I know, amongst others. But yeah, perhaps there is also Gulf money. In our case, I should say, for our project, we have money from the European Research Council, so it's EU money, and we have money from the British Arts and Humanities Research Council, so it's British government money, and we have money from the Humboldt Stiftung, which is German foundation money.
Qatar has a huge project with the British Library.
Yes.
How much of that is already online, I'm not exactly sure, but they have a massive project, not just digitizing written material, but also sound.
Yes, I'm aware of that. I am not aware of them funding documentary research, but perhaps you're right. Thank you for that. Then there's another question. Dr. Najmabadi, what would you think to be the next step if one aims to continue your project regarding both the digital archive and the studies based on it? Do you consider any idea you accomplished if you had time or budget? Oh, do you have any ideas of what should happen next? I guess is the question, both in terms of the digital archive and the research based on it.
I guess the next thing is to see published work that uses the archive and the various ways that it can be used to produce writings that would not have been possible without it.
Yeah.
Who might be able to, and this is me now, who might be able to take over this important archive to keep it updated and maintained? Are you taking any steps, or would Harvard University help you with that? What are your plans?
Well, the basic challenge actually is that how to make sure the website remains accessible after basically after I retire and I don't bring in more budget. So that's something that we're discussing with Harvard Widener Library to see if they can take charge of it, basically. Otherwise, the material will be there, but the kind of searchability that the website now allows will be lost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Absolutely. I wish you best of luck. I hope you can, because this is an incredible resource.
I hope so. Yeah.
There are many more. So it says from Puyan Bokai, if you were not able to travel to Iran for political reasons, would you have thought about creating this project? How important is access on the ground to people and resources?
Well, there is a whole team of people in Tehran that were doing the work. So after the initial work that I needed to be there and set it up, I don't need to be there. And there's a local project manager in Tehran that basically continued the work.
So that person is still working on this project?
Yeah, they're still there. It's just that we decided to wrap it up and not add more collections.
I mean, yeah. Okay, let's see. So then we have, do you have a place for, I guess, do you organize documents by issues related to women? Or was it a place for individual documents related to women, which people could send you? But I think that Professor Najmabadi has already mentioned that they're not accepting more material at this point.
But also, we never actually took any of the documents. We only digitized them and took the digital images because we're not in a position to collect material as such.
Yeah, that was one of the questions as well here. So you've answered that. And then there's a question here from Gunha Kim. Would you be able to answer how much did it cost to collect, digitize, and construct the whole digital archive? How did you persuade institutions to invest large amounts of money in building the digital archives related to Iranian women? Did the team appreciate donors, or I guess in any way, for example, with a small gift or thank you letter and so on?
I mean, we had small contributions from individuals, but really the overwhelming support came from NEH, and without their grants, we would not have been able to do this.
For those who might not know, that's the National Endowment for the Humanities in the United States, which is a major donor in the US in the humanities. How has the Islamic Republic reacted to this project?
Initially, there was no particular reaction by the government, but then at some point they started banning the site, so people have to basically use VPN to go around it. But everybody does that in Iran. People know how to do that.
Yeah. Is it still banned?
I haven't checked recently. I don't know. I assume once it's banned, it's banned.
Okay.
I don't know why they did it, so.
Why? What do you think? Do you have a suspicion? Is there anything that you think might be controversial in their eyes?
I don't think so, but
Yeah.
Ali Saidi asks, could you please offer some comments on how to interpret the pictures? Can you guide people on how to interpret the pictures that you've uploaded here? I'm not exactly sure what Ali.
Can I, as a follow-up to that question, how, having reviewed all of these pictures, how do you think in these images over time, women self-present, the way they assert their agency through how they pose in a picture? And what can you read in those changing postures from, you know, the earliest photos to the latest that you have?
Well, somebody has to do that study. I don't have the answer to that question. Somebody has actually has to go through these pictures and see how over time the self-presentation may have changed.
And self-confidence, that is, yeah.
Something somebody has to do.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But I haven't done it, so I don't know the answer.
So who wrote, I mean, the text that's underneath the names? So that the kind of metadata, who put that together?
What do you mean? What do you mean exactly?
So here you have a picture, for example, then you have the name, and then underneath you have metadata, so different bits of information about the picture. So who did that, and how did you get that information?
Well, I worked with several people who were sort of assistant editors, and we did that together. So some of them are obvious what we had, some of them are more difficult to figure out, but we would have discussion and decide what to write there.
And you've given each photo a number, I see, at the end.
I'm sorry for the interruption. I saw that 2 pictures were taken by Nasseruddin Shah himself. That is very interesting to see how many of those were promoted by the kings and, you know, rulers. That is quite fascinating that they were maybe promoting this.
So is there a search button? Like if you wanted to look up Nasseruddin Shah or something, would you be able to find this?
Yeah, there's, you can just enter, you know, like where it says Rostaju, you can enter what you want, what you're looking for, and search it through there. Yeah.
And for non-Persian speakers, is there an English
Yeah,
search?
there's an English side to it. Yeah.
Okay, great. Quite a few really interesting questions. Would you be so kind as to speak a bit more? This is something I wanted to ask as well, a bit more to the scale and coordination of the cataloging and digitization efforts. This is by Bilal Hashmi. How many active team members are or were involved in the US, Iran, and elsewhere? Do you have regular meetings?
Do I have what?
Regular meetings. So I guess it's a management question. You know, how are you organizing yourselves? How many people do you or did you have?
In Iran, there is a local project manager, and she worked with a photographer who did the digitizing for us. And here I worked with sometimes 2, sometimes 3 people for processing them and making them ready to go online.
Great. Do you have regular meetings? I'm guessing not, now that your funding
Not anymore, yeah.
Yeah. Great. And then another question. One should read your book. Ilham says to get the critical thinking tools to interpret the images. So that's a nice advice. Thank you very much. Then we had more from Ilham. Oh, we have here something on the Iranian Women's Movement Museum that they have been collecting. What are they collecting? Documents, I guess, and that you can submit documents to it. Nayera, if there's anything more you'd like to add to that, or Professor Najmabadi, that's interesting. Then we have amazing website, so big accolade for you. A question from Amin Azimi: have you encountered any examples related to the LGBTQ+ community during the Qajar area while collecting these documents and curating the archive?
I can't think of any offhand. I'll have to look more carefully with that question in mind. Nothing pops out in mind.
Well, maybe you can, Amin Azimi. From Zainab Tamasuki: is the utilization of pictures metadata a dependable and credible historical source feasible? I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure
I
either.
guess, are the metadata reliable? The data that you have for each photo?
Whatever we put on site is reliable. If we weren't sure about something, we wouldn't put it there.
So the name of individuals that you have identified, those are reliable because you have double-checked them.
Yeah.
Right.
So you have some kind of verification or certification procedure that in place for checking that, or you did. Would you accept more information about the photos? So for example, if someone is unknown and is recognized, would you still like that information, and could you process it?
Yeah, sure. We can definitely process them.
If there's any other question that I haven't read out and people would like to ask, please, could you copy and paste it again? Because there are quite a lot to go through.
Professor Azad, there is a question by Sarah Moulai about how this kind of archive can pave the way for oral history project.
Mm.
And Professor Najmabadi, do you have any audio documents that you have collected through this process?
There is some, but not a whole lot, because that's not what we were oriented to. But then we did start recordings, occasionally when people were talking about their collections, how it came about, and their family. And then if they gave us permission, we put those online. So there are a few audio documents, but not a whole lot.
Very good. Thank you.
There's another question, but I think you may have answered it already, is once you had access to the Qajar documents, why did you decide to include only women-related documents?
That was the nature of the project. That's what I was interested in. I mean, people who are interested in other things, they can do that.
I think these digital corpuses are very much, it's the creators and the research questions, as Professor Tavakkoli was saying, that kind of guide these corpuses. And I think what we've also learned is that because these are publicly available, anyone can then do their own tagging and ask their own research questions and query these documents for their own questions. So this is really a resource, I think, for other people.
And it's important also to recognize the kind of questions that originally guided Professor Najmabadi to initiate this effort. If you recall, she indicated that in the earlier scholarship on women, a lot of people would say that, oh, we can't do this, we can't do that because we don't have the document. There is no document on women. There is no the document on this and that related to women. And Afsaneh tirelessly has collected this material to show that our colleagues who were lazy were wrong, that actually the material is there, but is the responsibility of researchers to find the document that you need to, rather than assert that, oh, such a document doesn't exist. The kind of questions that you ask then identifies a particular document, rather than saying that it doesn't exist, go and find it. And Afsaneh in this case has done that.
Yes, I would second that completely. And in my period, if you want, in the medieval period, I always asked, and I was a second career academic. I came from a totally different background, but I was reading the history of Islam, and I asked my professors, why are we not learning about what was happening in the Eastern Islamic lands, in Iran, Afghanistan, and all that? And I was told, oh, because we don't have any sources. Well, we do. Now we have been collecting hundreds and hundreds of documents from this region. So it's also a matter of it's not only laziness. I mean, I agree there is that. I mean, it's easier to just go with the tradition if you want, but it's also quite complex. You have to collate from, I mean, our documents, we've had to collate from China, from Central Asia, from the US, from St. Petersburg, from Iran, from Afghanistan. It's a big job. That's the thing. It's a massive job to collate this stuff. So yeah. This is a wonderful example of how you can do it, but it requires money, it requires dedication, and all that. Couple more comments here from Shabnam. When did the project start in its earliest iteration, and the first rounds of funding? So when did you actually start this, and when did you get your funding for this?
I started thinking about this and discussing it with other historians probably around 2003, 2004. And then we didn't get any funding until 2008, I think. So that's how it started.
So it did take you a good 4 years or so before you got the funding. Great. Then from Leila Moslemi, since you acquire most of these objects from Iran, in response, how many Iranian students, researchers, and scholars have used this website? Do you have any data available about the Iranian access? Well, I think you've already said that it's been banned, but do you have any?
I have access, and people, several people have just emailed me and told me that they have used it in order to do their research. So people have access and do use it. So.
In Iran as well?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I guess through the VPN, they were able to get in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And do you collect any data? Do you have any more specific data, user data?
No, I haven't collected any data on that.
Okay. One person, Afsaneh Najmabadi, says, I just want to express my gratitude to Professor Najmabadi. Without her research and her work, my career would not have been possible. So there you go. Great archive. Thank you for the introduction from, I just lost it, someone else. Oh, Said Hariri. Yeah, lots of accolades again for all your great work.
Mm-hmm.
There's another question that's popped up, which is interesting, so I might just add that, if I may. From Nasiba Baimatova, saying, you've created a very needed archive. Congratulations. Could you please elaborate on any connection with Central Asian museums or archives?
I don't have any contact there, so yeah, there's not much to elaborate.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But that kind of a connection would be sort of important.
Yeah,
and scholars like Nasiba, you could initiate it, in a sense that there is one thing and it can, there are lacks. And as you identify the lacks and possibilities of expanding and creating a larger, please take the initiative. And if you need help, let us know.
Just a note on anybody who's interested, the Tbilisi National Museum is very interested to kind of get its collection kind of incorporated into archives of Iranian studies, because they have a huge early Qajar collection of artifacts and documents still within Tbilisi National Museum system.
Thank you. That's good to know. I think you will find that many other people, many other archives and libraries are keen to share their collections as well. So I'm really glad that we've started the conversation today, and I hope, you know, through this series we can also get some really interesting collaborations and interactions between people who might not have thought to be in touch, to get in touch. We've probably maximized all our listeners' wonderful thoughts. I don't know if Professor Tavakkoli, you have anything more to say?
My really gratitude to Professor Afsaneh Najmabadi for initiating this heroic project, that it takes a lot of patience, a lot of organization, and really power of persuasion to be able to collect something like this. And I hope the younger generation and colleagues could continue this process and begin to add. And as you use the collection, of course, please do give reference to this invaluable source. I often see that colleagues use resources and they never identify the original source where they got the material, and it's ethical to do that, of course.
Yes, I second that as well. Some websites, I mean, we've put it on ours, and I know the Princeton Geniza project does it too, always has a little message in the bottom saying, you know, please credit, and then they give a language that you can add for crediting. Professor Tavakkoli, what do you think? Shall we call it a day? We still have people coming in.
Yeah, people are really coming in. We have had over 500 registered, and there may be some confusion about the timing. But what really impresses me about the career of Professor Afsaneh Najmabadi is that she has not only theoretically and historiographically put Iranian women's history on the map and brought it to the larger attention, and has posed really innovative, original theoretical and historiographical question. She has also supplemented it by this labor of love that involves creating an original archive. And I think this is a really unique contribution. And I myself, on behalf of all of my students who are using your archive, we are grateful for your dedication, a lifetime dedication to really advancing Iranian studies beyond the studies of men and masculine history.
Yes.
And thank you, Professor Azad, for enabling this seminar series, and we look forward to collaborating with you further. And Professor Najmabadi, thank you for inaugurating this lecture series on rethinking history, returning to archives and documents. And my gratitude to everyone who joined us today, and by your really inspiring questions got a fantastic conversation going. Thank you all. Good day, good night.